Well, welcome all. Today I'd just like to do a very short video on how I believe you should correctly balance a gimbal. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because I've come across quite a few videos of late where people are doing a sort of a quick and dirty showing how to balance such gimbals as the new DJI Ronin SC2 and whatever. And I don't really believe that they're doing people a good justice with the way they're demonstrating how to do the balancing and going into details. They're generally putting on a very lightweight camera and just rapidly going through the motions and saying this is how you balance the gimbal. Now, my view, this applies to any gimbal, any camera setup, and I won't go through the whole breakdown, but I'll just go and show the results that you should be getting if you've balanced your camera properly on any gimbal whatsoever. Now, the first thing that you need to do is when you put your camera onto the gimbal to balance, you point the camera with the lens going up and it should balance itself so that it just sits upright in that fashion. Get it right that way, because that's now getting the pitch motor balance axis correctly set up. Then you go into the horizontal mode like that, and you adjust the camera backwards and forwards with weights or with whatever so that it sits level in that fashion. And basically you can put it into any position, it'll just sit there, and that means that that's balanced properly. It's the pitch motor that causes all the issues that people experience with gimbal balancing, plus one other feature that I'll talk about shortly. So when you've done that, if you're lucky enough to have locks on your system, you just then unlock the roll motor and basically adjust it so that it will also sit horizontal like that. Lock that, and then you do the final adjustment with the yaw motor, and this is where I see so many people, in my view, doing a totally incorrect fashion of balancing. They basically just say, take your gimbal, hold it 45 degrees, and then get that arm balanced. Now, this is balanced perfectly, but look at what happens when I put the gimbal at 45 degrees that way, or 45 degrees that way. It's entirely wrong. It shouldn't be doing that. What you should be doing to balance it properly is you lay the gimbal parallel like that to the ground so that the yaw axis motor is parallel to the ground, and the yaw arm should then end up laying horizontal like that. When it does that, then you've got it properly balanced. None of this 45 degree crap. Get it like this. That's the way you balance it, and then you've got your gimbal statically balanced. Now, I say statically balanced using the analogy that is discussed in glide cams. The fact is that by doing it like that, you've got the gimbal now statically balanced. Everything sits without the motor on perfectly as it should be. And then when you turn the motor on, if it's on again, yep, there we go. Now it's actually perfectly balanced for no movement. But the moment you start moving around, now you can see that this is, the pitch motor is what causes all the problems that people have. When they see examples being given of balancing, I've seen so many YouTube videos and forum threads about people having vibration issues with their gimbals after having it perfectly balanced in the static mode. As soon as they start moving or moving the gimbal about, it starts vibrating. It's usually the pitch motor that causes the vibrations. And that's where I call the another analogy is that dynamic balancing. With a glide cam, you have the static balancing where everything is just fine when nothing's moving, and dynamic balancing is balancing the glide cam when you start moving things about, such as spinning the shaft on a glide cam. The same principle sort of applies with motorized gimbals, and the problem that I see time and time again is the way that people have their gear attached to the gimbal itself, to the mount. Now, I've spoken about this before, and the issue is if you've got cables that's sort of all over the place, if you've got monitors that are mounted on flimsy GoPro mounts, if you've got the mount down at the bottom just attached to the small square Arca Swiss plate that often comes with the gimbals, all of those will vibrate. Even the lens on the mount can vibrate. You may not notice it But when the harmonics start working with the gimbal, you start getting a sort of a resonant frequency, and the motor starts trying to compensate for that, and that's where you start getting these vibrations occurring. So you've got to actually pay attention to the way that your camera is set up, and that everything is rigid and fixed in there with minimal possible movement. The worst culprit are cables. If you've got them coming out all over the place, they will start vibrating and they will start interfering with the pitch motor. So make sure you've got those things sorted out, as well as the other aspects of your gimbal, and you won't have any issues. And this is what I don't see being presented in any of the gimbal balancing videos that I've seen. People just seem to put a small lightweight camera onto a gimbal, quickly go through the motions that I've actually just shown, and say, that's it, you're right and good to go. Most times you're not. So please take that on board, think about it, and if you have any issues with your gimbal balancing, it's the dynamic balancing that is probably the culprit, and the way you've got your camera and that set up. But also follow the procedures that I just showed when you're balancing a gimbal for static balancing, and that's going to be your starting point for getting everything right. So that's all I wanted to say today, and on that note, I'll just say cheers.